Hi everyone, my name is Laura, and today for the adult craft for the month of January, we are going to be making a cross stitch just like this one with a very nice little warm steaming cup of hot cocoa for those cold winter days. So please stick around and learn to cross stitch with me. Okay, so to get started with our cross stitch project, we have a bag here, and this shows the information about the video and what it is. So on the inside, you have a couple of things. One is going to be your cloth. So this is like a typical cross stitch cloth that you're going to use to make your cross stitch today. You are going to have your threads. So if you sort of unwind your threads from your little piece of paper. I tried to keep them as organized as possible on here. So you're gonna unwind your threads from your little piece of paper here. So you should have, these are the 5 different colors that you're gonna be using. There should be more than enough thread to use for each of these, but in case you are curious, these are the numbers that are on the embroidery floss. So if you go to Michael's or Joann's or whatever, this is where you, these are the numbers that these colors would be under. So we're going to be using the green color first today. I'm not going to show you how to do the entire thing. Cross stitch is somewhat repetitive, so it's not, I don't think, beneficial to watch an entire video of somebody doing cross stitch, but these are the colors that you'll be using for your cross stitch today. You'll notice you might have some longer threads. Your green threads or one of your colors might be longer. It's not that big a deal. You still have the same amount that you would need. It's just your threads might be a little bit longer. It's up to you. You can have that, and you can put that in half when we thread our needle, and then you can decide if it's too long or not. You don't want your thread to be too long because then it will start to tangle on you. So it's kind of up to you. You can either use the full 6 foot length, which will be kind of down to half, which will be 4 foot, or you can 3 foot, or you can cut it in half and sort of do 1.5 feet, which would also work pretty well. The rest of them should be about 4 foot long. I accidentally cut the green in the wrong length, so that's why they seem a little bit longer. You'll also have your needle here. This is a pretty big needle. I did mine with it and it worked out okay, but it's pretty big. So it's bigger than you probably would have for most any other project that you would have for sewing. So you'll also have your embroidery hoop, which is what this is. This is an embroidery hoop. They also use it for cross stitch. To use this, you just unscrew this part, and this center hoop will come out of it, and then we'll put our cloth onto it. You also have a needle threader. You probably won't need that. I never used mine because it is these are literally called like big eye needles. So the eyes on these are pretty long, or pretty wide, but if you need them, there's an embroidery threader there. And then you have your pattern. So this is the pattern we're going to be using today. It lists all the colors down at the bottom again in case you need them. But again, I've sort of like color coded them on this part. Then you also have some instructions. These instructions were sort of stolen from another library, so you will see that thank you on the end of your sheet. But this has basic instructions on how to do cross stitch. So this actually you can use for basically any cross stitch project that you're doing. So I would recommend keeping these if you're ever planning on doing cross stitch again in the future, just so that you know, you kind of have some basics here. You can also watch videos or stuff like that, but I actually followed these instructions pretty to the letter, and they worked out pretty well for me. So the first thing that we're gonna do, just be aware this is a counted cross stitch, which means there is no pattern. You don't have a pattern on your on your cloth or anything. So if you ever see that, just be aware you're going to get a blank cloth like this one, and you will be counting your cross stitches. So this recommends that you steam iron your cloth. I did not do that before I got here, but I recommend you do it just because it'll help keep your pattern flatter. But I didn't do that, so I'm just gonna try and pull it really tight. So the way you put it onto your embroidery hoop is you sort of lay it on the top of the circle part, and then you take your hoop, the outside part, and you push it down on top. This one, it doesn't look like I have it undone enough, so you might have to loosen up your screw part at the top in order to get it big enough. Let's see. So now that it's on there, kind of want to pull it a little bit so that it is on there pretty taut, and won't move around very much, and you don't have a lot of wrinkles in it. And then once you have it, you can start tightening it up a little bit so that it doesn't move around and the top hoop doesn't pop off. Okay, so just when you're doing this, try to have clean hands. If there's anything on your hands, it will transfer pretty easily to your cloth, since it is very white cloth. So try and keep that in mind. Keep your hands as clean as you can. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to try and find the middle. It doesn't have to be the exact middle. You're just looking for sort of a general area that is middle. So I kind of stuck that needle in there, moved it around a little bit, so now you can see your hole in the middle. And I am going to grab my thread. So we're just gonna do a little bit of green here today. So we've got the green, and we are going to pull one strand out of our green. Okay, so you're going to hold your thread up, and you're going to just sort of pull one strand, so you've kind of got it separated, and then you're going to just pinch this and sort of hold it tight enough that you can pull the strand through, but not so tight that you can't, and then just pull it all the way out without letting go or pulling anything else, or anything else. You'll notice it sort of bunches up underneath. That's okay. And we're gonna pull that all the way out until it's gone, or it's all the way out. And then you're just gonna pull that back kind of out straight so that it's not all bunched up anymore, and set it off to the side, because we're only gonna use the one thread. So most cross stitches use 2 strands, which is still what we're going to be doing today. So we have our one long strand. I am going to put my ends together like that, and I'm going to sort of pull it so that it is folded in half. And on the end where you have your 2 strands, I am going to take my needle and I'm going to thread it. So like I said, you probably don't really need the threader, but just in case, I'm going to show you how to use it. So you just take your, maybe it's easier on the white. You take your needle threader, you put it through the hole of your needle so it sort of can sit on there like that. You're going to put your threads into the circle part, and then pull your thread through. So we're not going to pull all the way. So now if you, we're just going to pull it down like, I don't know, maybe 6 inches or so. So now when you hold it up, you have one end that has the loop on it, and then you have the other end that is through your needle eye. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna go back, and we've got that hole, that circle in the middle that we are gonna start with. And I sort of put my finger on sort of really close to where the hole is at. This needle is, of course, obviously sharp, but it is not really, really sharp. So you're probably not going to hurt yourself, but your fingernail should protect you either way. So I usually sort of put my nail there, or put my finger there so that I can also find it relatively easily. So now I've got my needle, and I'm going to, bring that all the way through, and I'm going to pull my thread all the way through. This is the back side, until my loop is right there. And then I'm gonna hold that, but I'm not gonna pull it all the way through. I'm just gonna put my finger on it. And then I am going to go one up. So you'll see I have my my one piece right there, and I am going to go diagonal to the hole that is diagonally above it, right there. So you've got the one directly above it right here, and you've got one next to it, which is right here, but I'm going to go diagonally. And I'm still holding that piece on the back so that it doesn't pull all the way through. And I am going to pull that. And when you look on your back piece and you have both of your threads, you are going to take this loop, and you are going to put your needle through it, which when you pull it, don't pull it super tight, but you can pull it tight right here. You now have a knot, so without actually making a knot. So one of the things about cross stitch is that you don't really thread, or you don't really make knots the same way you would when you're sewing. So this is a way to make a knot without really like having an obvious knot. So you've got that right there, and it's pretty secure now, so you actually can pull on it and it won't come out. And when you turn it back around, you have, what did I do? This way. You have your first stitch. So now you're not going to make your cross yet. You are actually going to make a whole row of stitches just like this one. So you came in this one, or you came down in this one right here. You're going to go down one into the spot that is right next to your first stitch. Let's see if I can pull it up a little bit. So right there. And you are going to come up through that and go back down again in your diagonal. So again, you're gonna come to your next one. And you are going to come up and go down. And up. And down. So now we have 4 stitches. Okay, so that gets us started with that. So going back over to our key, so this is going to be our pattern. This is where the counting comes into play. So this color right around the edges, this sort of like tan greenish color, whatever it is, we're not doing anything with that. That's just going to be plain cloth. So what I did in order to sort of get myself started is I counted how many squares they were, how many squares in the green, since I'm starting with the green. And I sort of, well, first I mark the center. So it doesn't have to be the exact center, just sort of a general center so that you know where the middle of the pattern is, which you are also going to correspond to this, right, to the center of your cloth. So I have the center of my cloth. I would count out from this point. So from here to there is 16. I'm not going to worry about this edge part. We can always do that later with another piece of thread, but we want to do, you know, I'm going to do this bulk of this body part first of your cup. So I started here. I am not an expert cross stitcher, so if you know how to do this better than I do, feel free to do it better or differently, but this is how I'm going to do it. So I have 16 there. So now I know that I need to make 16 stitches in order to make this line. I'll do the other side probably. I'm gonna do all of this side in one step and then I'll do this side in another. So I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna try to do 16. I don't know how many will fit on here. Definitely at least 16 will fit on here. You don't want to go really close to the end of your thread with this. You want to make sure that you still have plenty of thread. When you look on the back side, it should just be like up and down straight, other than that initial little knot that we made. So I've got 4 stitches, so I'm gonna try and make all 16. But like I said, you don't want to, basically you only have a half a stitch at this point. So we only want to use half of our thread. So if you'll notice you're getting really close to the end, or you feel like you've used more than half your thread, go back and do your X's so that you have a complete stitch. Again, I could be wrong about that, but that's how I did it when I did it. Okay. So I have now done, I think 16 stitches, but I think it might be 17, which is fine. So I'm going to show you how to fix your error. The nice thing about this is that since we're not using any knots, we can actually just pull our thread directly out of our needle. And then you can go over here, pull up that thread, and oops. Oh, I'm on the wrong side. And now you are back to 16 stitches. So now that we have our 16 stitches done, I am not going to go longer than this just because I think it's a little easier to sort of work in blocks. And so I'm going to rethread my needle. You can obviously go all the way across and just do one really long line. I'm just not going to do that. I'm gonna do halves rather than, because I feel like it's less overwhelming when I have halves. So now we have our first line. This is a 1/2 of our crosses basically. So now we are going to make our X's. We're gonna make them into X's, which is where the cross stitch comes from. So I am going to go to the hole that is directly above or below my last stitch. So I went directly underneath it. I'm going to pull through. And now I'm going to make another diagonal. So I've got my one stitch and I'm going to go directly diagonal and pull that all the way through. So now you can see I have another, the stitches going in the other direction, and I now have an X or cross. I have I now have my full stitch made on that last one. And I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna go directly below, come through, and go up diagonally into the next line. And then go back below. And back up. So now you'll notice that all of your stitches are going in the same direction. That's kind of the goal with cross stitch, is for all of your stitches to go in the same direction. So when you're starting, it's always best to sort of go from bottom left to upper right, and then that way your other stitch will always go in the same direction too, and it'll look more uniform. When you flip it over, you'll see just this line of stitches, just like that. It's supposed to look pretty clean on the back. So that's what it will look like if you're doing it this way. So we're gonna do all 16 until we're at the end. And oops. All right, so I got a little knot. This happens a lot. So keep in mind that it may not actually be a knot. You may be able to just tug on it a little bit and it will, oops, come out. So now there's not a little knot in it. So just be aware, you may be able to tug on it a little bit so that it comes out. If not, you may have to take the knot apart. It definitely happens no matter how much thread you have, but the longer your thread, the more likely it is to happen. So keep that in mind. So I'm gonna keep going. Okay. So I now have my full line. Obviously I still have a lot more thread, and so I can continue to make more stitches. You just, whenever you get to the end, you want to make sure that you have enough thread in order to sort of wrap your well, that's not really official in any way. You just need to have enough thread that you can come back down and go through. I'll show you. So I've got plenty of thread here. I can keep going for probably at least another row, but I'm going to quit so I can show you sort of how to finish off. So as I said earlier, we don't really make knots in cross stitch. So you can see I've got my last thread here. So the way that you finish a cross stitch is you actually go back through your stitches. So I am going to go underneath. We're only going underneath the thread. We're not going to go underneath the white cloth because we don't want it to show on the other side, right? So I am underneath at least 3 of my stitches. And I'm going to pull my needle all the way through until it is flat, okay? And then I am going to trim off the end with my scissors. And now I have a complete stitch. So you'll look at it at the front, that's the way it looks. It's got all of its little crosses, and then we look at it on the back and it's a pretty straight line. So let's pretend we have finished our entire product, our entire thing, making sure we count and that we have the right number of stitches everywhere. So we are all finished and we have our finished project. Looks pretty good, right? Good job, everybody. You did an excellent job. So now we're going to finish it off. So we've got our front here. I have to show you the back because this is probably the cleanest project I've ever done in my life. But it doesn't look It's not perfect, but it looks pretty good. So a couple of tips when you are doing cross stitch, and these are still in your instruction booklet or instruction paper too. You'll notice that you have these little white bits that are a couple of stitches apart. I went ahead and connected the two that were over here and the two over here, but typically you don't want to have more than a stitch or two in between your project. So you can see I sort of did that on the back over here, but legitimately, normally you wouldn't really want to do that. So I could have started over with each individual one. I didn't. But here are all of my areas where I sort of knotted, because like I said, I did mine in two sections. And so here are the areas where all of my things were connected. You can see some of those over here too. And yeah, it still looks pretty good for me, because whenever I do it, this is the first time I've ever done it using that method of doing them all in one direction in each way. But normally I have always made the little X's. There are better instructions in the booklet, so if you want to know how to do it properly, feel free to do it that way. I just sort of cheated a little bit because, you know, nobody sees the back anyway, right? So now we are going to hang this. So you have a couple of options here. You can frame it if you want. This fits relatively well in like a 5x7 frame. So if you wanted to do that, you could. I tried that a little bit, but I'm going to show you the method of just using this embroidery hoop. If you put it in the frame, you can reuse your embroidery hoop, but this is it looks really nice when it's sort of hung this way. So I'm going to take out my white thread. You actually really don't use very much for the project. This is really just for sewing for the most part, or not sewing, but for connecting. So I'm going to pull out one piece of thread, same method I used before. Pull kind of slowly. You can also sort of straighten this out if you need to. So it sort of bounces back when you're all finished, which is nice, but I always straighten it out afterwards because that keeps it from getting knotted. So I have my one string. All right, so I'm actually going to use 4 for this so that we can kind of keep it secure. So there's 6 strands in each one, so I'm going to pull out another one. And this will be, I'm gonna move those 2 out of the way. And so we have a 4-strand basically. So if you'll notice, if you look at your strands, you've got 4. And we're actually just going to use this hole. This is the one time we're actually going to make a knot. So we're going to make a knot at the end of our 4 strands. I usually do 3 knots. You could probably do 2, but I usually do 3. Oops. Okay, so I've got 3 knots here. I am going to thread those into my needle. This one you might want to use the threader for. It might just make things easier just because there is a lot of strands. And now we have our one strand that has our needle, our thread, or our knot at the end. And now we are going to trim up our canvas or whatever it's called, our cloth. So this would be a really good time to take it out and press it again, just to try and get any extra wrinkles that might be in there. Then we are going to trim it a little bit. So we want to keep a couple of probably inches on each side of the design. So I'm just going to trim around the edge. Haven't done this part, so this part we are learning together. You want to use pretty sharp scissors for this because the stuff is pretty stiff. If you have fabric stickers or scissors, you can use those. Okay, so now we have sort of cut around the edges and we can toss our extra bits. And I'm gonna pull my thread from over here, our white thread, so that we can sew up the back. And I'm just going to fold over one part, and I'm gonna pull the thread all the way through it. And then as I fold over, I'm gonna do a running stitch. So if you guys, I think that's what it says. If you guys did my hand warmer project, you know what a running stitch is. So I'm going to, this one doesn't have to be very nice. You just need to sort of pull it sort of together, and so it looks like that, and then you're just going to keep going. And you'll notice as you keep pulling, it'll sort of start making your circle. Okay, so I'm going to pull it kind of tight. I'm actually going to go through a little bit, a few more. I'm going to pull it kind of tight, and then I'm going to just come back through these stitches right here, still sort of holding it tight, and then make a little knot. Again, I usually do this about 3 times. But 2 is probably enough. Okay, and then you will snip off your thread. And now you have your finished cross stitch, and it is ready for hanging. You can either hang it right here up at the top, or you can also add a ribbon or something like that, however you want to do it, and put it up on your wall. All right, I hope you enjoyed making your cross stitch project. If it was your first one, I hope that it went well. There's plenty of videos and stuff on the internet if you are looking for more in depth, or if you need extra help. So feel free to go to YouTube and just Google cross stitch basics, and you'll find a lot of stuff. But we also have embroidery books here at the library, or cross stitch books, anything really about sewing. We have plenty of stuff here at the library. So if you are interested, please feel free to come on in and get some books. I think there's also some stuff through our virtual options, so I will try to highlight those two in a bookmark for you guys. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to send us a picture of your project, please do. The email address is emaillibrary@avondaleaz.gov. So email library, all one word, @avondaleaz.gov, and I will also put that up on the screen. Just so you know, for the spring, we are going to be doing some in-person programming for adults. So the first program of the month will be a take-home kit, just like this one. And then the second program of the month will be a in-person program that we'll be having at the Sam Garcia Library. So for January, for the month of January, obviously this is our take-home kit, and our in-person program will be on the 4th Saturday, I believe, 4th Saturday of the month, and it will be, I can't remember the time, so please call and register. It's also going to be on our online calendar, and we'll be making lava bead bracelets. So if you can, please head over call the library to register for those, and join me in making those. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed your project, and I hope it looks nice hung up in your house. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.